I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands.
Welcome to Build an Iconic Life podcast. I'm your host, Chris Whitehead, and this podcast is dedicated to help you build a life with zero regrets by focusing on how you have everything you need to stand up, stand out, and live life on your terms. Let's dive right in. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Becoming Iconic. I've got somebody that we were talking in the back studio a little bit. I've been following Brian. This is Brian Grasso, everyone. I've been following Brian now for, 8 or 9 years on social media. Brian, you have been putting out content that is raw, it's real, it's your personal experience.
Yeah.
When you've moved from Canada into deep Canada, and then, you move back to the States, and here's Carrie, wearing bathing suits and men are like flocking all over online. And so there are just so many aspects of how you two have lived your life out loud for the purpose of actually helping other people to become more of who they are. And Iconic is all about that too.
Yeah.
That I was really, really excited when you said, yeah, man, let's get on the podcast and jam. So what would you describe your career in the last decade? Like, where have you gone? What have you done? What's the purpose behind it? And where are you going now?
That's great stuff, man. First of all, you're a great dude. I really this is an honor for me. You're just a stand-up guy, and I'm so honored to be here and being asked to be on this iconic show. Specifically your question, let me just backtrack past a decade. I spent a large part of my career in the athletic performance space. And what I classically, I was called a performance coach. To whittle down what that meant, though, is that I dealt with the mental and emotional performance of elite athletes. So Olympians, pro athletes, national team athletes from around the world. And that maneuvered me into the consultancy role. I'd consult around the world with different governing bodies and Olympic committees and pro athletic teams. I get asked a lot because I've had some of the athletes I've worked with, win Olympic gold medals, etc. The question I get asked is what separates the gold from the silver medalist at that level? And it's not athletics, because they're all elite and amazing. It's the half square foot of real estate between your ears. That's what separates them. So when I left that profession, and I had an inkling, and by the way, when I say I left the profession, I don't know, I like being a Renaissance man. Like I've been a poet, I've been a speaker, I've been an author. I don't look at life as having a career. I look at life as having several careers, all of which are very passionate and speak to my strengths and the things I enjoy doing and how I like to impact people. But I couldn't get it out of my head when I left the performance industry that the stuff I taught in that nexus is stuff that everybody else needed to understand. You described Iconic to me in the backstage in the flame, and I loved your explanation, is that we all have seeds inside of us for greatness. We all have that capacity. How do we then marshal it out? How do we compel it to work in our favor versus our disfavor? And that's actually an important point. Left to its own devices, your mindset will work against you.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to marshal it. And, I don't love the term, but it applies. You have to understand the way the brain works so you can manipulate it to work in your favor. And so I jive naturally with Iconic and you and the representation of the flame. So the last decade or so, that's what I've been doing. I've been working with entrepreneurs. I've been consulting with large corporations. My wife still works in the elite athlete space with NBA basketball players, as an example. But we're bringing the mindset and emotional intelligence end to performance and success, just to different marketplaces. As a matter of fact, what we're doing now is primarily geared towards adolescents, kids.
Where did that come from?
That's a funny story. So we were living up in the mountains of Quebec, Canada. And then backstage, Chris, I was telling you about that. We lived at the top of a mountain in a forest, no neighbors for 2.5 miles. very isolated, really nice, very tranquil, very peaceful. But we were doing all of this mindset work via live stream. So we had a home studio, we'd live stream onto Facebook every day. It became a very popular show. We won live stream awards. We'd have viewership into the 1 million people a month would watch our show around the world. And in a very interesting happenstance, the recording artist Pitbull, became connected with us via a third party we both knew. And then he started really liking the things we had to say and how we phrased them. And so he invited Carrie, my wife, down to Miami to discuss the idea of collaborating with him on certain things, because he's really into that. Most people know Pitbull as just a singer or, a hip hop artist. But if you listen to him talk, he's a very mindful, mindset oriented person. And so Carrie flew down to Miami and she sat with him for 8 or 9 hours on a given day. And they talked about this array of ideas of how we could work together. And what they decided to settle on, and I think it's beautiful, is that unbeknownst to most people, Pitbull actually owns 22 charter schools around the United States. And they're called SLAM, Sports, Leadership, Arts, and Management. They make the curriculum a bit off-centric from standard curriculum. And he doesn't charge kids to go to the schools. It's funded by him and his nonprofit. And so what he asked us to do is create a curriculum where we could teach mindset and emotional intelligence to the high school students at his charter schools. So Carrie and I moved our family from the mountains of Quebec to A1A Boulevard in Miami, Florida. And we started building this curriculum and then piloting it at 2 of his schools in Florida. One is in Miami, one's in Boca Raton. And, about 5 or 6 months into that, we met together, myself, Carrie, Pitt, the superintendent of all of his schools. We met at a restaurant in Miami, and we agreed. The students loved it. The administration loved it. The parents loved it. Everything was working perfectly with this curriculum. And so he asked if we would roll it out to all 22 of his schools nationwide, to which we said, of course, it'd be our pleasure and our honor. 3 days later, the pandemic started. Ugh. So schools closed. Now, Chris, you're a successful man. I'm going to say something and you're going to, of course, say, well, yeah, that's what you do. We could have let it stop, or we decided to do what successful people do. We pivoted.
Yep.
How do we pivot to make this still work? And Carrie came up with the idea of if we're not going to be in schools for the foreseeable future, where else are we going to find teenagers? And she realized you're going to find them online. You're going to find them in apps. And so we set upon building a company, infusing capital into it, working with tech teams and hiring a CEO, et cetera, to put our entire curriculum in a gamified app that is user-friendly for young people. So it's really, you're building this acumen of skill and understanding of emotional intelligence and mindset, but you're not even realizing it because it's so embedded into the game. You're just playing the game. But the app itself is teaching these lessons. And now we're incorporating AI and even AR, augmented reality, into this app over time, so that we're availing ourselves of where the science is going. And so that's the long story of how we got into it and where we are now with it.
Tell me this app is available.
Not yet. It's coming out later in 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to know when it is. I want to know when it is.
Yeah.
For me, so my first business was K&R Services. I was 24 years old. I had gone to college and about 6 credits shy of graduating, had my own issue with the dean of the school and said, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
So I work at Radio Shack, become the #1 salesman in the Eastern region. And I'll never forget, a couple came in one day and he said, I don't understand why you're working here. Mm. And instead of feeling like he had said something negative to me, I felt ashamed. And the reason I felt ashamed is I realized I had been regressing to not try something. So I ended up getting hit on by Amway, which is a multi-level marketing company, and saw all these little zeros written on the board. And I couldn't figure out how to be a manager and work 100 hours a week and build Amway. And there was somebody that was successful and they were cleaning houses. So long story short, I walked out one day, told my wife that I'm quitting. She said, well, stay for the insurance. And I said, too late. And within 6 months, she was working with me. And Brian, I had no idea what I was doing, like zero idea, but I was on fire. I was listening to these little Amway tapes, $7 a month. They would send me 2 or 3 of these tapes and I'm going down the road, and I never made any money with Amway. But boy, oh boy, did that mindset training start. And my real personal development began with a book called The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck, MD, when I was 20 years old.
Sure.
And I realized for the first time that I could choose who I wanted to be in this life. And that, you know, I'm from the South and I was raised in a lot of very fundamental Christian upbringing. So there was a lot of guilt and and this was the first opportunity for me to go, what if I let that go? So as K&R Services developed, I ended up moving from North Carolina back to Virginia, and I ended up naming the company WPR Services. It was Whitehead Painting and Restoration. Here's the kicker. I spent more time working with my men, helping them heal from the trauma of childhood than we did. And we made a lot of money, but my real passion was like, hey, you can get off Oxycontin. Hey, I'll be your brother. Hey, we'll go do this together, even though I own the company. And it was this compulsion to want to help people. Yeah. And here we are today, both of us. To touch children, though, before they have some of the experiences that you and I both had, walking the long, dark highway.
Yeah, precisely.
What the hell has happened to my life?
Yeah.
I know I'm appreciative that I'm strong enough to have survived that. That's about all I can say.
Yeah, well said. I mean, you know, it's fun. That was beautiful. And I want to touch on it for a second, because one of my side gigs, I'm a chief culture officer for a tech company. And it sounds funny, a corporate officer describing that job as a side gig, but it really is. It's not a huge investment of time for me. I love the work. I love the people. But my job in that organization is to create, maintain, and nurture a solid culture from top to bottom. And that's like breathing to me. So I really enjoy the work, and it doesn't take a huge amount of time or energy. But the reason I bring it up is I'm always reminding people that a good company builds people, and people build the company. So our objective is not to build the company, it's to nurture the people who are building it. And so I couldn't agree with you more, in that it's an end around that most people can't seem to work their minds around, that the best return on investment you'll ever make is the people who work with and for you. If you build them, they'll build the company, and everybody will win because of it. So I agree from top to bottom in everything you said. And yes, it's I often joke that I wish I had me or our app when I was a teenager, because I would have saved myself a lot of dark nights. But at the same time, I'm grateful for what I've traversed. It's made me who I am. But that is our objective. One of our mainstays is that we intend to eliminate teenage suicide and the use of pharmaceuticals, or the dependency on pharmaceuticals. Now, people listening right now and watching may seem, or they may suggest that eliminating teenage suicide is a pipe dream. And I think the world is made up of pipe dreams until someone makes it happen. But I do agree that eliminate is a very strong word. We use it on purpose. But really, the dependency on pharmaceuticals, that's something we're really after. I know Big Pharma's not going to like it, and I know we'll have a ton of opposition. But I just don't like the idea of teenagers being compelled or defined as needing an external medical intervention to regulate things like dopamine and serotonin, to deregulate their natural emotional curves. I think it's a far more sensible approach, and this is the ilk of our app. Learn to regulate your emotions. Learn to understand them. Learn to appreciate the way the mind works and how we can manipulate it to work in our favor. I think investing in that with kids is far superior than investing in a pill. that they may or may not have to take for the next 15, 20 years if dependency is incurred. So that's a lot of what we're after with this app and the greater brand itself.
Not to mention that if you know any of the science behind it, you start plugging up the receptors for serotonin to flow with a drug. What it means is that addiction starts, and it means that the body will not naturally produce that chemical on its own. And so that's part of why Big Pharma probably isn't very happy with what you're doing, because you're taking the system away that actually self-supports. And I saw a post yesterday online, and it said the same people that create the pandemic are the ones that provide the solution.
Right. And you get tagged with being a conspiracy theorist for saying that, but isn't there common sense to what you just said? I'm not interested in buying the solution from the person who caused the problem, because I automatically assume there's a nefarious consideration behind it. And how could you not? How could you not assume that? I don't think it's even remotely conspiracy oriented. I think it's common sense. And, I'm always very quick to say I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not dispensing medical advice. But what you said about serotonin and receptors is exactly right. Another thing to consider is that I believe in natural means. I believe that the human body is built to regulate itself given the right environmental structure. And most people who don't know the science don't know that serotonin is produced primarily in the gut, not the brain. And so I'd like to know about gut health and what a child or an adolescent is eating on a regular basis. I'd like to understand their sleep cycle. I'd like them to understand how important those things are. I'd like to talk about physical activity and how essential that is in regulating neurotransmitters and hormones. And until we start talking about those things, I don't think we should be shoveling pills down kids' throats.
You and I are neck and neck for age.
Yeah. I'll be 50 soon.
Yeah. I'm 49. October, I'll be 50. Mm-hmm. And I have seen on my dad's side the more corporate structure of life, and working for the State Department, and then he privatized, and he was in big tobacco, and the mindset of DC and all that kind of stuff. And on the other side, my mom is a white collar hippie. And I've seen the older generation having a harder time keeping up with technology's bell curve increasing. But I've also seen the proliferation of information is making things like conspiracy theory go out the window. Now, I don't necessarily partake in the flat earth theory.
Sure.
But I, like you a little bit, I'm a bit of a poet. I'm a bit of someone that likes to squint my eyes when I read things and say, what's the author trying to say? And if you understand maybe that they don't necessarily believe that the earth is flat, what they're saying is we won't just buy information because you tell us this is the way that it is anymore.
Yes.
And these younger kids, all of this is happening as if by design.
Yes.
The app that you're creating, the energetic push toward people wanting to ascend out of this, even this body. And we have to be careful, in my opinion, because all it takes is 1 degree shift, and we're now living in a metaverse doing the same pills and the same things, when that's not the concept of evolution that we were striving for in the first place.
Right.
Correct. And so some of us, for whatever reason, are compelled to stand on the rock and yell at people in the most polite way possible that there might be another alternative. And the beautiful thing about what you and Carrie are doing is, number one, you're doing it together, which is freaking amazing. Number two, you've continued to elevate yourself. You were 49 years old, doing squats, doing weightlifting, doing things that people by our age stop.
Yes.
And it is not, look at my beautiful muscles. You have sweatpants on that you rip up, or the shorts that you pull up, and you're going in with the shirt and the stocking cap, and you're like, the hell with it. And you have not just done that because I want to show you that I'm lifting weights alpha. You've been doing it for a couple years in live videos to show a progression. You've talked about the shoes that you've worn. You've talked about how you stand. there's so much meaning for anyone that wants to see success if they're just willing to pay attention to the clues.
Sure. Yeah.
And I fully support what you're doing with these children, man, because they are hungry for it.
Man, I appreciate that all so much. Just to give a broader snapshot to your viewership, my wife became a professional athlete at the age of 42. She's currently ranked third in the world in the fitness competition federation that she competes in. I intend to win the world championships of powerlifting. I imagine I'll be about 53 years old when that happens. There's so much to say, Chris, based on what you said there. I think a lot of what we do is we try to help people understand that their limits are self-conceived by and large, and that a lot of those self-conceived limits are based on influences we've been handed our entire lives. Like you said, I've been hearing it, and so have you, and so has everyone else, that when you hit mid-age, 40 to 49, you got to start reconciling with the fact that you're not going to be as physically apt or prowess oriented as you were in your 20s. I disagree. There's no science that says that's true. None. It just became something we accepted. Matter of fact, I've done all the historical research because I was interested. And the Spartans, perhaps the most robustly physical warriors this planet has ever seen. And get this, to everyone watching right now, it was expected that you were going to be in the Spartan army as an active duty soldier until the age of 65. 65. But we've convinced ourselves that at 40, the best we can do is go for a walk. It's just not true. You're right. I use my powerlifting on Facebook as a progression. I don't take my shirt off and show you my abs. I'm not trying to be impressive. But if you really have watched the journey, what you've seen is a man who has taken the simple and consistent road to getting better over time, because that's all we can do at any age, by the way. And it's one of our core values. Simplicity plus consistency equals success every time. We use it in our company. We use it in our lives. We use it in our athletic pursuits. And it's a core value we're teaching young people through our app. Simplicity plus consistency will always equal success.
Dude, I love that so much. My personal exploration, began at 20, and it began sooner, but it really started honing in at 20. I started taking life a little bit more seriously. And all I ever wanted to do was to figure out the foundational rules of anything. That's all I needed. The rest of it is creativity. That's how, the universe made me. That's how God made me. And to know that there are other people that are out here that have the exact same purpose in mind.
Sure.
And that aim for good. That's what this whole show is about, man. Yeah. Because what if one person listening today says, if it is to be, it's up to me. I guess I'll start being simple. I'm just going to start being consistent. And I'm not going to worry about whether success shows up or not.
Sure.
I'm going to worry about being consistent.
Yeah. Process goals matter more than outcome goals every day, meaning the process that'll take you there is much more important as a metric than where you want to go. You metaphorically talked about the one person who might listen to this. Let me talk to that one person. Let me say to that one person, and if you're watching or listening, maybe it's you. Everything Chris just said is accurate, right? If it's going to be, it's up to me. But let's take it out of the axiom for a second and put it into science, because science, when it's proven, it's irrefutable. So there are two things about neuroscience that you have to understand as fundamental laws. And I love that you grounded everything you just said there is, let me know the foundation. Right? That's perfect. Because here's the foundation of neuroscience. There's two laws. Number one, your brain doesn't believe me, it believes you. So I can give you all the motivation in the world. I can tell you my script and my core values. I can tell you and show you what I do to succeed. But it's not until you start telling yourself that it's possible for you that it's going to matter. Your brain doesn't believe me, it believes you. That's number one. And number two, your brain believes everything you tell it. Everything. So if your internal language on a regular basis is very lack-oriented, very victimized, very woe is me, very unworthy, your brain believes you. And now it'll set forth this expectation. It's a beautiful arc of neuroscience to know how it all works, because it's like I said before, when you know how it works, you can manipulate it to work in your favor. So if I have internal language that is lack-oriented or it's unworthy, okay, that becomes it's called my unconscious narrative. Mm-hmm. Now, the most dominant unconscious narrative I have will press forward into my conscious brain in the form of an expectation. So basically what my unconscious is telling my brain to do is to make this story right, prove it accurate, okay? It's not metaphysical. I know we talk about laws of attraction, all that stuff is beautiful, but it's actually much more neuroscientific than people realize. Once my brain has received the coordinates from my unconscious mind as an expectation, my brain's job is to comport all of my actions, habits, behaviors, beliefs, decisions, and choices into this realm of proving that story accurate. So if you're that one person who needs to hear this today, if you've ever said to yourself when something happens in your world, see, I knew it wouldn't work for me. See, I've tried before and I always fail. What you don't realize is that you're creating a reality. Because long before it became evidence in your reality, you were telling yourself it wasn't going to work for you. Your brain received that message as an expectation, and it comported all of your actions, habits, behaviors, choices into making certain that that prognostication came true. And then your actions in reality simply reveal what your unconscious narrative has been this entire time. So if that's the loop, and it is the loop, that's the way science works. If that's the loop, we need to manipulate it. Too many people, when they want to make changes in their lives, their eating habits, their training habits, their relationships, their money, whatever it might be, they try to amend their actions and habits and behaviors. I'm going to drink more water. I'm going to eat better food. I'm going to start saving 10% of every paycheck, something along those lines. But inevitably, they self-sabotage. They try it for a couple of days. Maybe they make a little traction, but then they just revert back to their old habits. Why do they revert back to their old habits? Because the actions, habits, behaviors aren't the problem. The problem is the unconscious narrative. That's what's driving the expectation. So if we want to manipulate it, let's go back to rule number 1 and 2 of neuroscience. Your brain doesn't believe me, it believes you, but it believes everything you tell it. So you want to change your reality? Tell a better story. Tell yourself relentlessly what you want. Make that your dominant narrative and watch as your brain receives that expectation and begins to comport actions, habits, behaviors, choices, etc., into affirming that narrative as real. So if you're that one person today, there's your takeaway. Tell yourself a better story relentlessly.
In 2012, by the way, that was beautiful.
Thanks, bro. Thanks, man.
In 2012, I created a program called Activating My Purpose. And I've sold it to thousands of people through a company that I had called Think to Succeed. And now I give it away for free.
Beautiful.
And for the first 2 hours, what I'm doing is telling people and showing people that your unconscious mind, through the reticular activating system, that can only hold a few things at a time, because otherwise we'll go absolutely ass crazy.
Yep.
Controls everything. And the simple formula that I used was out of Napoleon Hill's book, Success Secrets, that you literally ask the universe for what you want. Then in the law of reciprocity, this is what I'll give in return. Mm-hmm. It's a good thing if you know your major definite purpose in life, because that's what you will give relentlessly.
Yep.
By which you then believe it. And then you simply thank God at the end of it, right? Well, what my experience has been with everybody that's been through it is 30, 45, 60 days in, if they'll put it on their cell phone and listen to your own voice, talk to your brain. Yep. It doesn't necessarily immediately happen, but what does start to happen is the opportunities start showing up that now give you the opportunity to work to make those things happen.
1,000,000% accurate.
And dude, just everything you just said. It's like if people could grasp one thing, if you're listening to Brian today and you even have a thought, I can be the change. The truth is he's told you, yes, you can.
Yes.
All you have to do is write it down on a piece of paper, say it to yourself exactly what you want, and then what you're willing to do to give back to the universe so that you can have it. It's that simple.
It really is. It really is. Can I expand on all that?
Please, this is your show, bro.
I love what you said there. And you mentioned the RAS, reticular activating system. And it's an important part of the brain to understand. So again, if you're that one person who needs to hear this today, the RAS is almost like a filter. More, it is a filter. And the way it works is this, and this is what I always tell people, 3,500 years ago, Lao Tzu, who wrote the book, The Tao Te Ching, talked about this concept he deduced. He called it the many worlds interpretation, which effectively means what his thesis or his hypothesis was, is that there are several realities available to us at any one time. They're happening concurrently. But the only reality you see is the one you're aligned to. Now, you people in antiquity thought that was fantastic. But then you fast forward to contemporary society, most people hear stuff like that and they think it's completely wonky and woo-woo and nonsense. Well, until quantum science comes along to establish what the RAS is and how it works. In actuality, Lao Tzu was spot on. The RAS is a filter. In any given 24-hour period, there's 1 trillion pieces of data that come into our general senses. Now, like you said, Chris, that's overwhelming. Our senses can't accept that much data in a given day. It's overwhelming. The chaos that would ensue if we accepted all that data in would be overwhelming, right? So there's many filters that we use to take in that data and then make it conscious, meaning we recognize it, right? The RAS is a huge part of that. So here's an example. And you said it perfectly, 30 days in, opportunities start showing themselves up in your clients' lives. That's exactly right. Because we've reconfigured that filter to now see the reality that we have made our narrative understand we want to see. If you're maybe overweight and you want to lose weight, but you don't change the narrative, well, likely your narrative every day is you're calling yourself fat. You're saying things like, I've tried every diet, nothing ever works for me. I'm going to try this, but it's probably not going to work because I've tried everything else and nothing's ever worked for me. If that's your narrative, all the RAS really hears is that nothing ever works for you and you're fat. So what it's accepting this trillion parts of data, it's only finding the ones to put into your consciousness that prove that story right. So Lao Tzu was correct. You're only seeing the reality you're telling your RAS you want to see. But if you start to tell your narrative in a different way, well, now you're augmenting the RAS to filter things differently. Now you're seeing opportunities. Now you're seeing traction. Now you're seeing wins. So the way you phrased that was just 1,000,000% accurate, and it's scientifically valid. There are innumerable realities happening concurrently, but we're only tuned into the one that we have filtered is the stuff we want to see, even if it's stuff we hate. But it's the narrative that's dominant. And so we're compelling the RAS to only show us that part of reality. It's the most amazing thing, but it's true. And if you could just get that today, then you realize the pen is in your hand. Tell the story you want relentlessly. I love the way you phrased it. Write it down. Write it down. And the second part of what you said was so essential because we say it differently, but we're saying the same thing. I always tell people the goal you want is question number 1. But question number 2 is, what are you prepared to sacrifice to make it happen? Because it's going to require a sacrifice. Right? So you have to know that too. So we're saying the exact same stuff, just in different ways. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, everything you just said.
I want to know, you have on your arm Salubana, right?
Yeah, recently I had it covered up, but it's still there underneath. Yes.
Okay. 8 years ago, people started saying Namaste all the time.
Yeah.
Let's talk about why that word means so much to you. I want people to, number one, look, man, you are brilliant. You just are.
Thank you.
I want people to know the you.
Sure.
Because and the reason I'm willing to ask it is because I know you share it freely.
Oh yeah. 100%.
And I want people to understand the heart behind this human that's talking to me right now. Because you're a very deep human. You're a very, very deep person, and I resonate with it a lot.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the space you're opening up for me here, and I'm definitely not shy. I think that I've learned over the years that I actually had a really good friend of me who explained he explained this to me one time, and it made me even more thirsty to be honest and vulnerable. He basically said, you don't make me want to run out and get tattoos, but you willing to show up in the world as you are and share your scars makes me feel more comfortable showing up who I am and reconciling with my own scars. And so that really is what caused me to be even more thirsty to be honest and vulnerable. Who I am behind it all, I won't be long with this, but I can be poignant. One of my earliest memories of a lack of worth I found in myself was when I was in grade 2. I never liked school very much. And I went to elementary school in the 80s, just like you, Chris. There was a lot less political correctness back then. So I never enjoyed school. I never excelled in it. And I remember at a parent-teacher interview, my grade 2 teacher telling my mom in front of me that Mrs. Grasso, your son is retarded and needs to go to a school with other retards because he'll never learn, write, read, or articulate himself like normal kids. I was only 7 or 8, but I remember feeling wholly embarrassed. And I remember it having a pretty big chasm in how I not just saw myself, but now the expectations I carried for myself. I'm retarded. I'm stupid. I'll never be normal. And so I spent a great deal of time in elementary, middle, and high school living up to that expectation. I got straight D's all the time. I didn't know at the time it's because that was the reality I saw. It was the reality I was given. That was the influence that then my RAS went to work on that narrative. You're stupid. You're retarded. You'll never be normal. You'll never be smart like other people. And so that became my reality. Now, in addition to that, that's just a memory I have. In addition to that, I'm never going to claim that there are people who didn't go through worse childhood tragedies and abuses, more so than me. I mean, I would never claim that. But, I had my fair share of physical, emotional, and mental abuse as a young person as well. And that helped shape the narrative in me that I really wasn't worth much. If the people who were meant to love me treated me like this, what does that say about my value? And I carried that narrative in my life for a long time, completely unbeknownst to me. I sabotaged every goal I ever tried for. I sabotaged every relationship I was ever in. I didn't know any of it was pinned to this childhood, experience I had that was multiple years in the making. I didn't know that I didn't value myself. I didn't know I didn't have worth in who I was. I didn't know any of that. And that's why Salubona, the word, became such a flag that I wanted to plant in the ground, both for myself, but for other people. Because fast forward to 2006, and I should add to the story, I spent 12 years of my life clinically depressed. I spent many years living in my parents' house, not in school, not actively employed, most days trying to find the physical strength to get out of bed to go brush my teeth. And if you've ever been depressed, you know exactly what I mean. It takes a physical toll on you. But fast forward to 2006, I had righted the ship of my life to certain levels. I often describe myself as I was functionally alcoholic at that point, meaning you wouldn't know that I was depressed. You wouldn't know I was hyper anxious. You wouldn't know that I had no self-worth because I made myself functional day to day, that I didn't represent those things. But I was in Australia. I was in Melbourne, Australia in 2006. I had started a company in the youth fitness industry. And that particular demographic in the fitness industry was very explosive at the time. And so I got invited all around the world to speak about youth athlete development and how it all worked. And I'd been asked to speak in Melbourne, Australia, at this rather large event. And so I flew out there, and I was sitting at dinner on the first night that I was there with all of the other speakers and the organizer, and we were having a very nice dinner. I wrote about this story in one of my books, as a matter of fact, because it became such a landmark moment for me. And I had met for the first time another speaker. He was from South Africa. His name was Douglas. He was a physical therapist. I met him at this dinner. Wonderful guy, very jovial, very intelligent, very easy to listen to. He was a really great communicator. And he and I were just talking over dinner. And we were talking about the informality of language and how much language in our society had become so informal. And we were noticing more and more that, hey, what's up? Which is colloquial and it's fine, but what does it mean? Like, is there an answer to that? And the one thing I always remember Douglas said to me at that dinner, he said, we're often in such a hurry with each other that if you were walking by somebody you knew, perhaps they were a neighbor, and you said, hey, Chris, how you doing today? And if Chris said to me, actually, Brian, I'm not doing very well,
that's great.
What would my immediate emotional response be?
That's
For
great.
most people, it would be, I don't have time for this, right? And we just were spinning yarns about things like that. So then he said to me, I'm from South Africa, and in the Zulu culture, there's a word, and it's pronounced sawubona, Sawubona. And it translates directly into English as I see you. He said that's a common greeting in the Zulu culture because they actually spend a moment with each other. We could be crossing paths, Chris, and we would exchange, the word sawubona, but we would pause for a moment. We wouldn't just brush past each other. We would pause and we'd look at each other and we would exchange energy in that moment. And we would make that moment about just us, not where I was going or what I have to do, not where you're going, what you have to do. But in that moment, we would find the importance of human connection to be so vital that we would spend time with each other just for a moment. And I was blown away. And I thought, God, that's just such a beautiful concept. And holy smokes, sawubona, I want to do something with that word. I want to write a book about it. I want to teach about it. Fast forward a couple of days, I was flying back home. I lived in Chicago at the time. And, we were 19 hours into a 20-some-odd hour flight, and I was exhausted. But the whole conversation with Douglas started percolating in my head again. And I just had this moment where I realized sawubona translates to I see you. And it's meant to be something we share towards each other, which in and of itself is gorgeous. But what I realized in that moment is that we don't know ourselves very well. We don't see ourselves very well, right? Like, I didn't know that I was carrying the burden of this abuse and these words and these things that happened to me. I didn't know I was carrying them as a lack of value and worth I felt in myself. I didn't know that. So it didn't seem to matter if I tried to lose weight or tried to be happy or tried to have a nourishing relationship with a woman or tried to build a business and make money. I seemed to sabotage it all. And I didn't know why. And I didn't know all of it was connected to these things that happened to me when I was a child. How can you not know that? And maybe a better way of phrasing it, we shouldn't not know that.
Yeah.
We shouldn't. We're in such a hurry every day that we don't spend time with ourselves. We don't know ourselves, and we don't appreciate why we're either succeeding in this or self-sabotaging that. And unless and until we get to know ourselves on a much deeper, more intimate level, I would argue that we'll never be fulfilled. We'll never be happy. And we'll never really achieve what it is we want to achieve, because there'll always be an anchor holding us back. And it's not because of the abuse. It's because I wasn't aware of how much that had been carried forward as a burden in my life and limited the value I saw in me. So that's what the word means, and that's how it came to be represented in my life. And it's something I talk about and teach about all the time. By the way, before I say, or before you say anything else, I just happened to look over at my phone. I'm like, I only have a minute or two before I got a jet. I'm like, what a horrible place to end. But maybe it's worthwhile that everyone just lets that in for a few moments.
I honor you, brother, for getting on my show.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. You're amazing. And this conversation has been electric for me.
I knew it was going to be exactly like this, and I'm grateful for you. Hey, 1 minute. You have something coming up really, really soon down in Dallas. What's going on? Yeah, in conjunction with this company I work as a chief culture officer for, the company's called Metaplexus. Basically, we acquire companies that have good, strong IPs and products. They just don't have good company culture. They don't have good systems. They don't have good marketing. So we acquire them and bring all of that to them, and then we help grow revenue together. But primarily in tech space. They came to me about 2 months ago and said, look, we're going to start hosting a couple, 3 events a year. But, Carrie, my wife, is also on the Metaplexus team. She works as the lead coach, executive coach. And they said to us, you guys are just so good at events and event management and getting on stage. And so, do you guys want to basically host this event on behalf of our company? And we said, sure, absolutely. So it's just outside of Houston, in this beautiful place called the Serenity Garden Farmhouse. That's the name of the event center. It's 30 some odd acres of land. February 24th, 25th, 26th. I'll be speaking. Carrie will be speaking, but Martha Krejci, Jesse Elder, Dr. Allison Brager. It's all about the mindset, the path, and the optimization of you for 2023, and carry that into business, relationships, whatever you want. And here's my favorite part. I didn't do any of this. This is something Metaplexus brethren did. For something like that, usually the price tag is $997 or $3,000, whatever it is. It's $197. But here's the best part. Your meals and your lodging is included in that price. What?
Yes. When they told me, I was like, really?
Doesn't even make sense.
I had no idea you were doing that. But you get VIP dinners both nights with the speakers and the Metaplexus executive team. They have cabins on site on this 30 some odd acres. You get one of those. You get full access to the event, all for a little under $200. I couldn't believe it when they told me.
You hit me in the DMs about that. Send me that link. We will be promoting that alongside of you for you.
I so appreciate that. Bro, I know you're busy. I hope you can be there. If you're not, Chris, I totally understand, but I'd love to hug you.
I will, dude. I'm going down to Dallas to speak at the beginning of the month. I will leave that date available because I would love to see you, man. I'd love to see you, and I'd love to bring some of my my people that are around that area to come check you out too. I want to honor your time, man. I love you. Thank you so much.
Love you. Thank you for this invite. Thank you to everyone who watched and listened today. It really was a pleasure and an honor for me.
Jam with you soon, brother. Take care of yourself.
My guy. Absolutely. Thanks, Chris.
See you, man.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand.
Hey, friend. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to catch future casts. If you really enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it so others can benefit from it as well. I'll see you in the trenches.